Hello, welcome to this week's lesson. I'm Brian Vermeer. We're continuing our series on the last lessons of Jesus. That is the lessons he gave to his disciples during the Last Supper, the night before he was to be crucified. We're in John chapter 14 today. We're actually going to start with the last couple of verses of John 13, but we're getting into the first part of John chapter 14. Jesus has told the disciples that one of them is going to betray him. Judas, the one who eventually does betray him, has gotten up and left the dinner. So now Jesus has got a few more things he wants to say to the disciples as a group before they get up and leave. He's been trying to tell them that he's going to be killed tomorrow, but they seem to think that he's just going to be going away. And they're a little confused about what he's talking about. So let's take a look at John 13:36 through the first verse of chapter 14 and see what the disciples have to say about Jesus' idea of leaving them. "Lord," Simon Peter said to him, "where are you going?" Jesus answered, "Where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow later." "Lord," Peter asked, "why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus replied, "Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, I tell you, a rooster will not crow until you have denied me 3 times. Don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me." So, earlier he said, "No, I'm going away and you can't come." So Peter now, and again, in Peter's mind and in the mind of the disciples, Jesus isn't talking about death. That still hasn't crossed their mind. He's the Messiah. He can't die. He's not supposed to die. That's, their thinking. So, however, they know that right here in Jerusalem where they are, they know his life is in danger. They know that the Sanhedrin, the priests, the Pharisees, they want to have Jesus killed. So in their mind, Jesus is probably telling them that he's going to get out of town or leave the country or go away someplace safe. And Jesus seems to be saying, he's saying, "I'm going, but you can't come with me." They may be thinking, well, maybe he thinks it's too dangerous for us to go with him. And that's why he's not wanting us to go. He doesn't want to put our lives in danger as well. So Peter, and we've talked about Peter, being the impulsive disciple, being the one who thinks he knows it all. Peter is saying that he wants to go with Jesus. He says, where you're going, and tell me the truth. Tell me exactly, where it is you're going to be going. And Jesus says, well, where I'm going, you can't come, or at least you can't come now, but you will come later. So Jesus, of course, is talking about death. He's talking about, being put to death in the morning. And he's telling Peter, this isn't for you now. You're not supposed to die right now. It's not, God, it's not God's will that you be put to death right now, but you will come later. You are going to die later on in your life, and then you will be with me again. Peter, still thinking that he's just talking about going away, says, "No, well, why can't I follow you now? I'll lay down my life for you." Because again, remember, Peter thinks, Jesus is talking about going away, and he doesn't want to take the disciples because he's afraid it's too dangerous for them. And Peter is saying, "I want to go and be your bodyguard. Wherever it is you're going, I want to go with you, and I don't care about the danger. I'll die for you if I have to." And oftentimes as Christians, it's easy for us to make bold stands for Jesus when we're in a group of fellow believers like Peter is here. Peter is trying to act like the leader of the disciples. He believes himself, to be the leader of the disciples. And that's the way he's trying to act. He's trying to set an example for the others. And when we're with groups of other believers, it's oftentimes very easy for us to make statements like that. Yes, I'll die for Jesus. I'll gladly, put my life on the line, for Jesus. But then Jesus gets Peter to really think about this. He says, "Really? Are you really going to lay down your life for me? Are you really willing to do that? I'm telling you that before the rooster even crows in the morning, you're going to deny that you even know me 3 times. Not just once, 3 times. You're going to say you don't even know who I am. And sure enough, we know that after Jesus is arrested and is taken in for his trial, Peter, waiting outside to find out how the trial is going, is approached by some people who seem to recognize him as one of Jesus' disciples. And Peter, fearing for his own life, does of course say, I don't even know this man. I don't even know Jesus. So how different it is when we're in a group of believers to when we get surrounded by a group of non-believers or people who are even hostile to Christianity. When we're around a group of non-believers, do we deny Jesus by our words, by our lifestyle, by our actions? When we're with a crowd of people who are not Christians, do we uphold our beliefs? Do we behave as if we are still Christian? Do we talk as if we are still Christian? Or do we just kind of go along with whatever the crowd is doing and think, well, it's okay, God will forgive me for this later, or, well, I'm not doing anything really that bad. When you do that, though, you're denying Jesus. I'll give you an example of this, and again, not trying to sound, prideful or boastful, but just as an example, when I was with a group of soldiers, when I was with, my class at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, every Friday night they had free tacos in the officers club. So my class, I was up there for my officer basic course, and we would go there every Friday night, and we would all sit together at a big table, and we'd all have free tacos, and most of the guys would order several pitchers of beer. Well, I don't drink, and I don't drink because several reasons, partly because I don't want to ever take a chance on becoming an alcoholic, and the best way I think to do that is simply not to drink at all. And also, being raised a Southern Baptist, that's just one of the things of the Southern Baptist Church, is they don't drink. So that's kind of been ingrained into me. So when I was with this group of other soldiers, they'd order several pitchers of beer. I'd order a can of Coca-Cola. And they noticed that I never drank any of the beer. Now, it would have been real easy for me just to go along with the rest of the crowd. But I chose not to. I chose to stick to my beliefs. And one night while they were there, the beer was being passed from person to person, and someone asked, if I would pass it down to them. Now, I didn't, tell them, no, you shouldn't be drinking or anything like that. I just had my Coca-Cola, and and they did their thing. But once while I was there, the beer was being passed around, and I had to take the pitcher and pass it from the person on one side of me to the person on the other side. Well, while I had a hold of the pitcher, somebody asked me something, so I stopped to answer a question. And the soldier sitting across from me looked at me and saw me holding the pitcher of beer. And he said, "Look, Vermeer's drinking." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just, passing it down." And he said, "Oh, good. You're about to ruin my complete opinion of you." He was impressed by the fact that I stuck to my beliefs, even around the group. And he even told me that he wished he had that kind of determination, or that kind of, stick to it, being able to, uphold what you believe. So, Again, not trying to say I'm better, than anyone else. You do what you want to do, in that case. But when we're around other people, it's real easy just to fall into whatever they're doing. And if we're not careful, it's real easy to fall into sin because everyone else is doing it. Well, as someone said once, right is right, even if no one else is doing it, and wrong is wrong, even if everyone else is doing it. And that's a way that we can find ourselves denying Jesus. People who know we are Christians will put us in situations where they want to see how we're going to react. And they want to see if we're going to react against our beliefs. Because if we do, then that tears down our entire witness. So, Peter says he'll die for Jesus, and Jesus says, no, you won't. You're not even, you're even going to deny that you even know me. And Peter here, I guess feels kind of, let down. Jesus has just, corrected him, gotten onto him. But then Jesus says, don't let your heart be troubled. Now he's talking to all the disciples here because he sees that all of the disciples are confused and worried and still not quite sure what's going on. So he says, don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Now this can be taken as a command. Believe in God, believe in me. It can also be taken as, well, since you believe in God, also believe in me. And Jesus asking them to believe in him is a very bold statement here because Jesus, over the last 3 years, has changed their complete ideas about religion, about God himself, and especially about salvation. So Jesus is saying, don't worry, just believe in me. Just believe what I tell you, and you'll be okay. And that's advice that we need to remember a lot of times. Even if everything else seems to be going wrong, even if nothing seems to be going the way we think it should be going, believe in God, believe in Jesus. Trust Jesus because he knows what's happening. He knows what's going on, even if we don't. And he has a plan for things. So just let him carry out his plan. Let's continue now looking at verses 2 and 3 of John chapter 14. He says, in my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? If I go away and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. So Jesus says, first of all, he says, in my Father's house. Now, maybe the disciples think he's going to his Father's house. Some of the disciples, James and John, I'm sure in particular, know that Jesus' earthly father, at least, is dead at this time. Most likely his father Joseph had died by this time because he's not mentioned at all in the scripture after Jesus is 12 years old. So they may not be exactly sure here, but some of them may be thinking, well, maybe that's where he's going. He's going away to stay with his father. But Jesus says, in my Father's house, talking about heaven, talking about, God's house. And he uses the word house. And it's interesting that he uses the word house here specifically. Sometimes we talk about God's tabernacle or God's tent, or something like that. 2 Peter, the disciple Peter himself in the book of 2 Peter refers to our bodies as a tabernacle. Now, a tabernacle is a tent. It's a structure meant to be portable, not meant to be permanent. A house is a solid structure that is meant to be permanent. Right now, we dwell in a tabernacle of our body. God says that later on we will be in his house, a permanent place. Our bodies are not meant to last. We're not meant to stay in these bodies forever. Now, one day our bodies will be resurrected and become a perfect body. But right now, our sinful, corrupted body is not meant for us permanently. And I'm glad that is. The shape my body is in, I don't want to be in this body forever. But Jesus says, my Father has a house, a place where you can live forever, a place where you will be safe, a solid structure. And he says, and in my Father's house there are many rooms. Now this word translated rooms is the word monai, and that's also the same Greek word where we get the English word mansion, and that's why in some translations you'll hear it translated, in my Father's house there are many mansions. But that's not really what it means. It doesn't mean we're each going to have a huge house separate from everyone else. We're all going to live in God's house. We're all going to have our own room within God's house. We're all going to live together. And he's trying to say that there's plenty of room for everyone who wants to believe. There are many rooms. If I can talk mathematically for a little bit, this reminds me of a exercise that one of my math professors talked about once when he was trying to teach us about infinity. And he talked about the hotel infinity. That is a hotel which has an infinite number of rooms. And he said one day an infinite number of people came to the hotel and needed to check in. And the clerk said, well, we have an infinite number of rooms, so fine, each of you can, check into a room. There's room for everybody. But then later, another infinite number of people come up. And they say, we all need a room. Well, where is he going to put them? Well, the clerk says, that's easy. We still have plenty of rooms. Even though I've got an infinite number of rooms and I've filled them with an infinite number of people, I still have extra room. And what he does is he places a call to all the rooms and says, I need each one of you to go out, look at the room number on your door, double it, and then move to that room. So the person who is in room number 1 moved to room number 2. The person who is in room number 2 moved to room number 4. The person who is in room number 3 moved to room number 6, and so on. And if you see how that works, that now means all of the odd number rooms are open. And since there's an infinite number of odd numbers, now he's got an infinite number of rooms available. So now another infinite number of people can come in. And this, just even though I know there's not going to be an infinite number of believers, there's still going to be a very, very large number. But Jesus is telling us, don't worry, heaven is not going to fill up. There's not going to be only a certain number of people allowed into heaven. And then that number is cut off at a particular point. Anyone who believes in Christ is able to go to heaven. Don't think that heaven's already full and there's no more room for you. Jesus says there are many rooms. There's as many rooms as there needs to be for the number of people who will come to accept Christ. Heaven is not going to get full. He says there's plenty of room there. And he says, if this isn't so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? Or this could also be translated, if that wasn't so, I would have told you. He's trying to say, I'm telling you the truth. Everything I've told you is the truth. So you can trust me about this too. And he says, I'm going to prepare a place for you. One reason Jesus is leaving, one reason he's going back to heaven, and again, that's what he's actually talking about. He's not talking about just going someplace else away from the disciples. He's talking about going to heaven. But one reason he's going is to prepare a place in heaven for us. And he says, and if I go and prepare this place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you will also be. Now, I love that phrase, I will come again. Now, some people think that this is referring to the rapture and the end times. That when he comes back and takes the whole church unto himself. I'm not sure that that's exactly what that means, because Jesus is talking to the 12 at this time. He's talking to the disciples. The 11, actually. Judas has already left. So he's talking to the 11 faithful disciples. And we know that they aren't still going to be here when the rapture comes. I think he's talking to them personally. I think he's talking about their individual deaths. I think that when you die, Jesus himself comes and takes you to heaven. When my father died at the funeral, I mentioned that at 2:30 in the morning, Jesus came down to the room of that hospital and took my father to heaven. And from that time, his body was still lying there, but he wasn't there. He was with Jesus. And that's what I believe happens at your moment of death. That's one reason why I personally don't believe a lot of these near-death experiences, or people who claim that they've been to heaven and then come back. Because oftentimes, or most of the time actually, they don't mention seeing Jesus. They'll talk about, oh, I saw this great tunnel of light, or I saw, these family members, or I saw something, But a lot of times they don't talk about actually seeing Jesus. Now, I'm not saying that God can't do that, and I'm not saying that there haven't been people that that's happened to. We know that the Apostle Paul had an experience like that. We know the Apostle John had an experience like that. But I'm always kind of leery about them when they don't mention ever seeing Jesus, because I believe Jesus is the one who actually comes and gets you. I think he's going to be the first person you see when you die. And another reason I know this is because of what we're going to read about in our next reading. Jesus says, if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself. I will take you, is what he's saying. So that where I am, you may also be. Now again, the disciples are still thinking that Jesus is just talking about going away somewhere, going to another country, someplace safe. And they think that he's saying, well, when I go away, then I'll come back and get you and take you, and take you there. Or that you'll come later. You can't come right now, but you'll come later. So let's continue now, look at verses 4 through 6. Jesus says, you know the way to where I'm going. Lord, Thomas said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So Jesus is telling the disciples, you know where I'm going, and you know how to get where I'm going. You have all been saved. You have all accepted me as your Savior. You are all going to be going to heaven. You know how to get there, and you know how to tell other people how to get there. As a Christian, when you accepted Christ, you found the way to heaven. So you know how to get there now. And hopefully, you know how to tell others how to get there. Because again, that's our primary job as Christians. But Thomas, doubting Thomas, we call him, the skeptic, the one who wants proof. Nothing wrong with that. Don't look down on Thomas because he asks questions. As they say on Sesame Street, asking questions is a good way to learn things. Thomas says, we don't know where you're going. He's just voicing what all the other disciples are thinking. Have you ever been in a group where everybody's got the same question, but no one wants to ask it? Well, Thomas is the one who finally speaks up and says, we don't know where you're going. So you're saying we know the way there. How can we know the way there? And Jesus doesn't get on to Thomas about this. Instead, he just answers the question. Jesus says, I am the way. Now, he picked those 4 words in particular. Jesus said, I am the way. Not Muhammad, not Buddha, not any other religious leader that's ever lived. I am the way. Jesus is the way to heaven. Jesus says, I am the way. Not, I could be a way, or I might be a way. He said, I am the way. Not even I will be the way. Right now, Jesus is the way to heaven. He said, I am the way. Not I am a way. Not I am one way, among others. I am the way, the only way to heaven. You can't get there except by believing in Jesus. And then he said, I am the way. He is the path there. He will come and take us there himself. We don't need a map to get to heaven. When you die, you're not going to get lost trying to find your way to heaven, because Jesus himself is going to come and take you. And then just to further clarify, to make sure they understand, he says, no one comes to the Father except through me. There's a lot of people today trying to tell you that it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you believe something. Alice once asked the Cheshire Cat which way she ought to go. And the cat said, that depends where you want to get to. And she said, well, I don't care where I get to. And the cat said, well, then it doesn't matter which way you go. And she said, well, as long as I get somewhere. And the cat says, oh, you're sure to do that as long as you keep walking long enough. We're all going to get somewhere. And if you don't care where you go, then it doesn't matter which way you take. But there's only one way to heaven, and that's through Jesus. He is the only way. If there are other ways to heaven, then Jesus, number one, is a liar. And number two, he is an idiot, because he is about to go through the worst punishment that anyone has ever taken. He's about to go through the worst pain that any single person has ever felt. And he's about to let himself be beaten and killed for something that's not true. Why would Jesus have to be crucified if there were other ways that we could get to heaven? Jesus just said, if it wasn't so, I would have told you. I know there's a lot of people that accuse Christians of being exclusivists or being arrogant by trying to say that Jesus is the only way to heaven. I'm not the one saying Jesus is the only way to heaven. Jesus is the one saying Jesus is the only way to heaven. John chapter 14, verse 6. No one comes to the Father except through me. And that means no one. No one in earth. We don't all worship the same God, just by different names. Yes, it does matter what you believe. And I hate to say it, but if you don't accept Christ, then you're wrong. You're not going to get to heaven any other way. So don't go any other way unless you don't care where you end up. You must put your trust in Jesus. Next week, we're going to talk about love. Jesus' final instructions to his disciples concerning love. maybe they'll finally understand what he's talking about. So be sure and watch next week, and I'll see you then.